The transport deck of the Sovereign's Pride hummed with the controlled chaos of diplomatic arrival. Arya Solon stepped off the human shuttle with the practiced ease of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, though her heart hammered against her ribs in a rhythm that betrayed her nerves. Around her, the Cravathi delegation watched with barely concealed suspicion, their crystalline eyes tracking her every movement. The Cravathi were apex predators from a world where everything evolved to kill or be killed. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in sleek, midnight blue scales that caught the station's artificial light like oil on water. Their claws, retractable but never fully hidden, could tear through steel plating. Their jaws could crush bone with the pressure of a hydraulic press. They were magnificent, terrifying, and utterly convinced that humans were soft, fragile prey animals who had somehow stumbled into space travel through sheer cosmic accident. Arya had 3 months to prove them wrong. "Ambassador Solon," rumbled Warlord Kreth, his voice like grinding stone. "We welcome you to our territory. Do try not to break." The other Cravathi hissed with laughter, their equivalent of a chuckle. Arya smiled politely, refusing to rise to the bait. She'd read the briefings. She knew the game. The Cravathi respected strength, but they also respected those who didn't flinch in the face of danger. "I'll do my best, Warlord," she replied, her voice steady. "Though I should warn you, humans are tougher than we look." Kreth's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, a blur of blue-black scales shot across the deck and latched onto the hem of Arya's jacket with needle-sharp teeth. Everyone froze. Arya looked down to find a Cravathi cub no bigger than a terrier but infinitely more dangerous dangling from her jacket, its tiny claws scrabbling for purchase against the fabric. Its eyes, still clouded with the milky film of youth, blinked up at her with curious intensity. Herrick, a female Cravathi, likely the cub's mother, started forward, her scales flushing with alarm. "Release the prey thing immediately," but Arya was already moving. In one smooth motion, she lifted the entire jacket, cub still attached, raising her arm until the young Cravathi dangled at shoulder height. Herrick's tail whipped back and forth with what could only be described as delight, and a rumbling purr emanated from its chest. For a heartbeat, silence reigned on the transport deck. The Cravathi delegation stared, muscles tensed, waiting to see if the human would panic, scream, or worse, hurt the cub. Instead, Arya laughed. It wasn't a nervous titter or a forced diplomatic chuckle. It was genuine, warm, and utterly fearless. She looked at the dangling cub with the same expression one might reserve for a kitten caught in a curtain. "Well, hello there," she said, gently wiggling her arm to make the cub swing slightly. "You've got quite the grip, little one." Herrick chirped a sound Arya hadn't known Cravathi could make, and released one paw to bat playfully at her shoulder. The gesture was so unexpectedly endearing that a ripple of stunned amusement passed through the watching delegation. Then, incredibly, one of the Cravathi laughed. It was a deep, barking sound that echoed across the deck. Another joined in, then another, until the entire delegation was producing the guttural huffing that served as Cravathi laughter. Warlord Kreth's expression shifted from shock to something that might have been respect. He stepped forward, his massive frame casting Arya in shadow, and carefully extracted Herrick from the jacket. The cub protested, reaching back toward the human with grasping claws. "My apologies, Ambassador," Kreth said, though his tone carried less condescension than before. "Herrick is spirited and apparently lacks the survival instincts of his ancestors." "On the contrary," Arya replied, smoothing down her jacket where tiny puncture marks now decorated the hem. "I'd say he has excellent instincts. He identified the biggest, softest target in the room and claimed it for himself." The laughter intensified. Even the cub's mother, who Arya would later learn was Commander Vess, second in command of the station, allowed herself a huffing chuckle. "You are not what we expected, human," Vess said, taking Herrick from Kreth and settling the squirming cub against her shoulder. We were told your kind startles easily, that you flee from confrontation. In this time, Arya thought of Earth's history of humans who had climbed mountains for no reason other than they were there, who had sailed into unknown oceans, who had strapped themselves to controlled explosions just to touch the stars. She thought of humanity's greatest predators, persistence hunters who could chase prey for days without rest, social cooperators who could bring down creatures 10 times their size through strategy and determination. We do startle easily, she admitted. But we rarely run away. Running is boring. We prefer to see what happens next. Herrick chose that moment to lunge from his mother's grasp, launching himself back toward Arya. She caught him mid-air without thinking, cradling the cub against her chest as he purred loud enough to vibrate her ribs. His claws, sharp enough to score her skin, were carefully sheathed. His teeth, capable of puncturing flesh, nibbled harmlessly at her collar. The Cravathi fell silent again. But this time, the silence carried a different weight. They were reassessing, recalculating, seeing the human ambassador through new eyes. Among our people, Kreith said slowly, cubs only trust those they recognize as strong. They can sense weakness, fear. They avoid it instinctively. He gestured to Herrick, now contentedly curled in Arya's arms. This does not happen with prey species. Arya met the warlord's crystalline gaze without flinching. Then, perhaps, she said quietly, you should reconsider which category humans belong in. The transport deck erupted in laughter once more, true laughter this time, not mocking but appreciative. Warlord Kreth extended his arm in the Cravathi gesture of respect, claws carefully sheathed. Welcome to the Sovereign's pride, Ambassador Solon, he said. I believe these negotiations will be far more interesting than anticipated. As the delegation moved toward the inner station, Arya walked among them with Herrick still in her arms, the cubs purring, providing a counterpoint to the rhythmic thud of Cravathi footsteps. Behind her, her human security detail exchanged glances of mingled relief and amusement. 3 months, Arya thought. 3 months to build a bridge between species, to forge an alliance that could reshape the galactic landscape. But first, she apparently needed to return a predator cub to his nursery. Herrick chirped again, batting at her name badge, and Arya smiled. Humanity had faced worse challenges than winning over skeptical aliens. At least this one came with adorable distractions.